Here is a standard gardening trolley, which I'll be using as the basis for building a passenger riding trolley to pull behind a 4-inch traction engine. I started by removing the fold down sides and taking off the original axles. The axles were originally set in from the ends, which kept the wheels within the footprint of the trolley. However, for this project I wanted more stability, so I cut out the axle mounts and tack welded them onto the ends of the frame instead. Here you can see the axles in their new position. At this stage we took a few measurements to make sure the trolley was still a transportable length, while also confirming that there'd be enough room for 2 passengers. Next, I added some extra framing for strength. The plan was to reduce the frame width between the wheels, creating space for footrests and making the seat position much more comfortable. The metal I used was a bit thicker than needed, which did add quite a lot of weight, but it was what I had in stock, and it should make for a very strong frame. Once the frame was fully welded, I cut out the original sides. This has become one of those conversion projects where not much of the original item remains, but that's what tends to happen when you get carried away with an angle grinder and a welder. I had some wood that had been lying in a garden for a few years, so I decided to make use of it for the footrests. I sanded the wood to get rid of the dirt so it was ready for painting. These were attached using screws through the angle iron frame that we added earlier. To maximise the available foot space, I decided that the original centre pivot steering needed to be replaced with more of a go-kart style steering setup. Once the steering parts arrived, I modified them on the lathe so that they would fit the wheel bearings that I already had in the wheels. A quick test shows that they fitted well and spun freely. The pivot points are supported by a frame that lines them up with the original steering pivot position. This should help keep the steering ratio about right. I used some flat bar to mock up the steering design first, just to make sure everything worked as expected. It also allowed me to take the measurements needed to order the correct linkages. So I've updated the linkages that we did have on there, that were the temporary fix with this tie rod that fixes both wheels together. That way they're guaranteed to move at the same rate. And then I had to make that one a little bit short because it was too long. I just used the lathe to cut it down and then increase the thread with another 3 centimeters and cut the end off. So that's all in there. And then I made this M8 to M8 spacer, so screws in either end, and then we've got this tie rod here, still needs adjusting down to a shortened box. Left this, had to put an access hole in here to get to the nut if you ever need to take it off. It's all just temporary tack welded at the moment, but it does seem to do exactly what I was expecting it to do, so we'll probably go with that. The steps were reinforced at the back with a metal plate, and then again at the front for extra strength. I also added clearance for the wheel's movement during steering. After painting the frame black, I added a box structure to act as the seat frame. The seat itself will be made from plywood with a layer of foam on top and material stretched over it and stapled underneath. With the paint finished and some anti-slip tape added to the footrests, it was time to take the trolley to the rally field for a proper test. Thanks for watching.